The house was too quiet that evening, not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes after a long day, but the heavy, suffocating kind that feels like something is waiting to explode. I noticed it the moment I stepped inside, shoes lined too neatly by the door, curtains half drawn even though it wasn't bedtime, and voices, low, sharp, cutting through the walls like whispers of a storm. My mother didn't greet me. That alone told me something was wrong. "Sit down," my father said without looking up from the table. It wasn't a request, it was an order. At the dining table, my entire family was already seated, my uncle, my older cousin, even my aunt, who rarely visited unless something important was happening. And at the center of it all, like a verdict waiting to be delivered, was a thick stack of papers. Legal papers? My stomach tightened. What is this? No one answered at first. Instead, my cousin slid the document toward me like it was something casual. Like it didn't carry weight, but the moment I saw the heading, my throat went dry. I didn't understand all the legal terms, but I understood enough. This wasn't just a document. It was a surrender. Sign it. My uncle finally said, leaning back in his chair like he already owned the outcome. "It's for family protection." Everyone agreed. Everyone. I repeated, my voice sharp now. Everyone except me, apparently. My mother sighed, as if I was being difficult on purpose. "Don't start. We've discussed this. You always make things complicated." I stared at her, waiting for someone, anyone, to explain what was really happening. But the silence told me everything they refused to say out loud. I wasn't part of the decision. I was the target of it. My father finally looked at me. His eyes were cold, distant. "We don't have time for arguments. Just sign it and be done." Something inside me cracked, but not loudly. Quietly, like ice splitting under pressure. I picked up the papers. Page after page of legal language blurred in front of my eyes, but certain words stood out like warning signs. Transfer, waive rights, irrevocable, ownership. My pulse quickened. "This is about the property," I said slowly. "Isn't it?" No one denied it. That silence hit harder than any confession. My cousin finally spoke, almost impatient. "Look, you've been away. You don't understand how things work here anymore. This just keeps everything in the family. It's fair. Fair." The word tasted like poison. I looked around the table again. These were the same people I had grown up trusting. The same people who once told me, family is everything. And now they were asking me to sign away something without even explaining what I was losing. Or worse, they already knew. "You want me to sign something I haven't even been allowed to question?" I asked. My uncle slammed his hand lightly on the table. "Enough. Don't make this dramatic. Sign it or leave this house. That's the condition." The words hung in the air like a sentence already passed. For a moment no one moved. Even the clock seemed louder than usual. I felt every eye on me, not waiting for my understanding, but for my obedience. My mother's voice softened slightly, almost fake in its concern. "Don't embarrass yourself. Just sign it and stay part of this family." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Because I realized I wasn't being asked to agree, I was being erased. I placed the papers back on the table slowly. My hands were steady, even though my chest wasn't. "I need time," I said. My father's chair scraped back. "You don't get time," he said coldly. "You get a choice." He pointed at the door. "Sign it or leave." And in that moment, I understood something no one else in the room expected me to realize. Leaving might be the first thing I ever chose for myself. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't shout. I didn't cry in front of them. I simply walked out with the sound of my own footsteps following me like a judgment I refused to accept. Behind me, the house stayed lit, warm, alive, like nothing had just been broken inside it. but I felt it breaking anyway. The night air outside was colder than I expected. Not the kind of cold that bites your skin, but the kind that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. I stood there for a moment, waiting for someone to call my name, waiting for someone to say it had all been a mistake. No one did. The door stayed closed. That was my answer. Within hours it began. First came the silence, no calls, no messages, no replies. My number didn't even ring anymore. It just stopped being acknowledged. Then came the blocking. One by one, every family member erased me from their digital world as easily as deleting a name from a list. Then came something worse, the story. At first, it was small things, whispers through cousins, distant relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly forming opinions about me. Then it grew sharper, uglier. I refused to help the family. I was greedy. I abandoned them over money. That word followed me everywhere like a shadow that didn't belong to me. Friends who once laughed with me started responding slower. Some stopped replying altogether. A few, the honest ones, asked careful questions, questions I could tell they were afraid of asking. What really happened? But how do you explain betrayal when the people telling the story are the ones holding the microphone? I stopped trying. Instead, I disappeared quietly from their version of the world. Days turned into weeks. I rented a small place on the edge of the city. Nothing fancy. Just 4 walls that didn't ask me to prove my worth. The silence there was different. It didn't accuse me. It just existed. At night, I replayed that table in my mind. Sign it or leave, the way they said it so easily, like my presence in the family had always been conditional. Like love had a price tag I had somehow missed paying. But in that emptiness, something else started to form. Clarity. One evening, while sorting through old documents I had carried with me, I noticed something odd. A photocopy slipped between unrelated papers, something I hadn't seen before. A legal outline, not the same document they had shown me, but a reference to it. Draft notes, internal annotations, names of assets, clauses highlighted in a way that didn't look like protection. It looked like removal. My stomach tightened again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was recognition. This wasn't about keeping things in the family. It was about controlling who got left out of it. I started digging carefully after that. Quiet searches late, night reading, old records I had access to but never bothered questioning before. Every piece I uncovered made the picture sharper and uglier, and the worst part, the structure of it didn't feel random. It felt planned, intentional. My family hadn't just asked me to sign something. They had prepared for me not to understand it. One evening, I received a message from an unknown number. Just 3 words, let it go. No name, no explanation. But I knew somehow it wasn't a warning, it was fear. That was the first time I smiled since leaving that house. Because silence, I realized, wasn't just something they were giving me. It was something they were using to hide what they had done. And now that I was alone, I finally had enough quiet to hear the truth. The more I looked, the more the story stopped looking like a family disagreement and started looking like a carefully arranged trap. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, that maybe anger and distance were making me see patterns that didn't exist. But truth has a strange way of insisting on being noticed. It doesn't shout. It repeats itself until you can't ignore it anymore. And everything I found kept repeating the same message. This wasn't about fairness. It was about removal. I spent nights going through old files, scanned documents, and forgotten records I had access to only because no one ever thought I would question them. Bank statements, property drafts, ownership summaries. Each page added another piece to a puzzle I was never meant to see. And then I found it, the original draft, not the version they shoved in front of me at the table, but the earlier one, buried in archived correspondence. It had markings in the margins, notes in different handwriting, adjustments made over time, like someone refining a plan. My name appeared in multiple sections, and every time it did, something was crossed out, removed, reduced. Rewritten, my breath slowed as I realized what I was reading. If I had signed that document, I wouldn't just be giving up rights in a vague sense. I would be legally erasing myself from assets I had a direct claim to, assets tied to years of family wealth, shared property, and investments I had once assumed were simply ours. But what hurt more than the financial part wasn't the money, it was the intention. Someone had gone out of their way to make sure I wouldn't notice, to make sure I would trust enough to lose without questioning. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dim glow of my laptop screen, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't confusion anymore. It was betrayal with paperwork, and then came the second shock, a name. Not my father, not my uncle, my cousin. The same cousin who slid the document toward me like it was nothing. The same one who called it fair. The same one who avoided my eyes when I asked questions. His signature was on the advisory notes. He wasn't just involved, he was guiding it. For a moment, I couldn't feel anything at all. No anger. No sadness, just a hollow stillness, like my mind had stepped back to observe something too painful to fully process. Then the anger came, not loud but steady, controlled, useful. I stopped reacting and started planning. If they thought I left broken, they were wrong. I had spent years building skills they never paid attention to, handling contracts, understanding legal language, managing financial records for work they never cared to ask about. They saw me as the emotional one, the obedient one, the one who would eventually sign, but they never asked what I had become outside their assumptions. I began organizing everything I found, screenshots, copies, cross-referenced documents. I labeled them carefully, not like a victim gathering proof, but like someone building a case they intended to win. Days blurred into focused silence. I barely slept, not because I was distressed, but because I was finally awake in a way I had never been before. One night, while reviewing a particularly detailed file, I noticed something that made me pause. A clause hidden deep in the structure of the document. A contingency provision. It stated that if any signatory could prove intentional misrepresentation or coercion during execution, the entire agreement could be invalidated and legally reversed. I read it twice, then a third time, and that was when I understood something important. They didn't just try to remove me. They had done it in a way that could be undone. The same system they used to corner me also had a door hidden inside it. I closed my laptop slowly, my reflection faint in the black screen. For the first time since leaving that house, I felt something other than loss. I felt direction, because now I knew the truth wasn't just something to survive, it was something that could be used. The meeting was held in the same house. That detail alone would have broken the old version of me, the version that once believed returning meant reconciliation. That silence meant peace would eventually follow, but I wasn't that version anymore. I stood outside the gate for a moment before entering, watching the house that once felt like home now looked like a stage set for something unfinished. Curtains were fully drawn this time, lights brighter than necessary. Too much preparation for something they believed they still controlled. Inside, they were already waiting. My father sat at the head of the table again, my uncle beside him, my mother positioned slightly behind, as if emotionally observing but still aligned. My cousin, calm, confident, almost satisfied, placed the same stack of documents in front of him, the same stack, the same illusion of power. "Glad you came," my uncle said, leaning back. "We'll make this quick. Sign it now and we can move on. No apology, no acknowledgement of the past, just continuation as if nothing had changed. My cousin slid the pen forward again. The gesture was almost identical to last time, but this time I noticed everything, the subtle tension in their shoulders, the way my father avoided looking directly at me for more than a second, the faint impatience in their voices that tried to disguise uncertainty. They weren't as confident as they looked. Good. I didn't sit immediately. Instead, I placed my folder on the table. It wasn't thick, it didn't need to be. I reviewed the document. I said calmly. My mother exhaled sharply. There's nothing to review. We've already explained. No, I interrupted softly. You didn't. That word, softly, did more damage than shouting ever could. I opened the folder. Copies, extracts, notes, time-stamped records, cross-referenced clauses, the hidden draft, the margin annotations, the advisory signatures, and the clause they never expected me to find. My cousin's expression shifted slightly. Just a flicker, but enough. What is this? My uncle asked, leaning forward now. It's the version you didn't show me, I replied. The one you hoped I would never find. The room changed temperature instantly. My father's hand tightened around the armrest. That's not, my cousin started. It's your handwriting, I said, cutting him off without raising my voice. Silence dropped like a weight. I watched him carefully now. For the first time, he didn't look like someone in control. He looked like someone calculating how far the floor had fallen beneath him. I turned a page, intentional misrepresentation. I read aloud. Clause 14. Grounds for reversal if coercion or concealment is proven. My uncle scoffed, but it lacked conviction. You don't understand legal structure. I understand enough. I said, and I did, because I wasn't guessing anymore. I was certain. I looked at my father directly. For years, I thought I was part of this family's decisions. I said, turns out I was just the last signature you needed to complete something I never agreed to. My mother's voice softened, but it cracked under pressure. We were trying to protect you from complications. No, I replied. You were trying to protect the outcome. That hit harder than anything else. My cousin finally stood up slightly. This is being misinterpreted. We can fix this. I already did. I said quietly. I placed the final document on the table. Filed, verified, legally reviewed, prepared not as a threat, as confirmation. This agreement, I continued, is invalid under the clause you overlooked, which means every transfer tied to it is reversible. The word reversible echoed louder than anything they had said all night. For the first time, no one interrupted me. Not because they agreed, because they understood. I stepped back from the table. I didn't come here to sign. I said, I came to make sure you understood something. My gaze moved across all of them. One signature doesn't define control. A pause. Then, quietly, you do. I turned toward the door, then stopped just long enough for the final weight of my words to settle. And this time, I added, you don't get to decide who leaves. I walked out, no rush, no hesitation. Behind me, I heard chairs shift, papers move, voices rise, but none of it mattered anymore. Because for the first time since that night at the table, I wasn't the one being asked to choose. They were.